So first up for our Z270 gaming build here, we're going to go ahead and drop in the CPU. So pretty straightforward process. We've got the CPU socket cover right here, and directly below it is going to be the socket itself. So we're going to go ahead and pull out, lift up, and pop this guy off. Go ahead and set it aside. Make sure to keep it though. We're going to take our CPU, make sure those notches line up with the notches there in the CPU socket, and drop that guy in. So I do that. You go ahead and lower that down, push forward, tilt out, and drop it into place. CPU's installed. So next up, we're going to go ahead and pop in our DDR4. So for memory installation, always make sure to reference the manual, as there are generally going to be specific memory channels or DIMM slots that you're going to want to use. This is especially common if you're only using 2 memory DIMMs. But in our situation, we've got 4, so we're going to fully populate all of them. So make sure to go ahead and have your DIMMs lined up in terms of the notch that aligns with the actual retention socket part of the DIMM itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and line that up, angle it in, drop it in, push down in the center, and snaps into place. Now with this board, we've got QDIMM design, so only one latch needs to be locked into place. You don't have to worry about the other side. And just go ahead and complete that for the remainder of your DIMMs. So now that we've got the memory installed, CPU installed, next up is going to be the M.2 SSD. Now you've got 2 spots on the motherboard. Here at the top, directly above the primary PCI Express slot, and down here at the bottom. Ideally, you'd like to go down here at the bottom because this is going to have the least amount of heat when we talk about heat buildup from the CPU and then heat buildup from the GPU. So let's go ahead and drop our M.2 SSD there. Now, before we go ahead and pop it in, you will need an M.2 standoff. This is inside the box, and there's also going to be one small screw. So right before we go ahead and place our M.2 standoff on the corresponding 2280 notch, the majority of M.2 SSDs sometimes have a label on them. If you want this label to be correctly oriented before you put it on, because if I put it on like so, it's actually going to be upside down, you want to go ahead and peel off the actual adhesive and reorient it in the right side up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quickly, then put off my standoff, then mount the M.2 SSD, and then go ahead and put on the corresponding screw. Now that we've got our M.2 standoff there, we're just going to go ahead and slightly angle the M.2 SSD in place, line it up with the notch, and depress it down. And then from there, take your screw and go ahead and place it on the standoff. So we've got all the key components on the motherboard installed. Next up, we're going to mount the motherboard into the chassis. But before we do that, we've got possibly one of the most important steps that a lot of people forget about. That's putting the I/O shield in place. So we're going to go ahead and drop this into the chassis. You want to push on each one of the 4 corners until you hear it lock into place and you see it entirely protrude outwards. Every side needs to make sure that it's extruded. There we go. Yeah, that's correct. All sides extruded. Now that we've got our I/O shield installed, it's time to install the motherboard. So we've gone ahead and opened up the little box that includes all our screws. There's one that's actually clearly identifying that these are the screws for the motherboard standoffs. Now, with this Deep Cool chassis, we're already good to go. All the standoffs are already in place. But if your chassis didn't have the standoffs in place, you would want to make sure to put those in. So this is actually a really interesting chassis. This is Deep Cool's Genome. And one of the things that makes it actually really unique is that it actually has a full high-performance triple fan water radiator configuration built in. So we've got everything from the pump, the reservoir, the fans, it's all built in. So we've got a really beautiful reservoir here in the front, right? With the twisted coil pattern, looks great. And then here, where things get really interesting is you've got this beautiful steampunk inspired as communicated by Deep Cool pump and reservoir. So this is all tied in together, and so this is actually going to be our CPU cooler per se, because we've already got up here at the top the radiator along with the fans. So next up, we're going to go ahead and place this on top of our CPU, but we do need to get the back plate behind the motherboard so this will lock into place. So we've gone ahead and finished the installation for our CPU cooler. It's a lot easier with this Genome as it already integrates, of course, this high performance closed loop water cooling solution. I've got a couple of cables that I need to reroute in just a little bit more optimal placement for some cable route management purposes. So we're going to go ahead and tackle that first. And then from there, we'll go ahead and get our graphics card installed. Sometimes a really nice way to be able to hide cables is if you get some like blue tack and you can run that underneath certain parts of the heat sinks where you have some depth so that you can put your cable directly underneath there. So you can actually see right here, it's pretty close. It's hard to actually see where the cable is visual. I just hide it underneath the heat sink and then I just pop it out right at the end point of where the fan header is. So it keeps your cable routing really clean. So now that we've pretty much got all the core components installed, we've got our 24-pin motherboard power, we've got our 8-pin CPU power connected as well. We're going to go ahead and drop in the graphics card. Now I've gone ahead and removed the PCIe cover plates for these 3 I/O slots. And the reason why I've gone ahead and removed 3, even though I only need 2, is that sometimes you run into a little bit of an issue that when you go and lock the secondary GPU into place, it hits the top of the 3rd I/O plate. So just to make the installation process more straightforward, gone ahead and removed those. So let's go ahead and take the graphics card and get it into that top slot. You want to push in until you hear that nice affirmed click. We're good to go. I'm going to put 2 screws in place and we're set. We picked this card because one, it's an awesome high-end GTX 1080 card, so it's going to give us awesome gaming performance, but the ASUS Z270E gaming board, this Strix gaming board, one, it's got a perfect color complement to this Strix graphics card, and also they have synchronized RGB lighting. So the lighting that we have built in here, as well as down in this area, is going to synchronize with the integrated RGB lighting that we have for this. So all the way around, it gives us a great tie-in not only for performance, but aesthetics. So another really interesting thing about this graphics card that really complements this build is that if you wanted to be able to connect front fans without having necessarily worrying about cable management for the motherboard, is that there's 2 additional 4-pin headers that are right here. So you could run your fan, mount it right up in the front, and then go ahead and directly connect them to the graphics card. So at this point, we've gone ahead and pretty much connected all the key items. So everything from the CPU to the cooler to the memory, M.2 SSD, graphics card, power supply. We're pretty much set, but the last thing left is going to be the actual 3 fans for the integrated closed loop water cooling solution. So these are already actually running straight out the back. So normally, of course, you would run these to the CPU and CPU optional header, but this is a triple fan configuration. Now, this board that we've got, this ASUS Z270E board's got more than enough headers, but it also has got a really killer feature, the fan extension card. So this little card's actually going to connect to a bottom header at the base of the board, and we can run this card right out here and connect all our cables right out here. So don't even have to worry about anything connected directly to the motherboard. So we're going to go ahead and connect that, tie down these cables, and then get ready to fire the system up. So we've gone ahead and connected our fan extension card, which is going to go ahead and connect the 3 fans, which are for the integrated closed loop water cooling solution. Now, you guys, I'll see right here that I've gone ahead and added 2 magnetic cable mods RGB LED strips because this ASUS Z270E gaming board does support an ASUS Aura RGB header. So down here at the bottom of the board, as a little trick for this chassis, there's an opening for the PSU shroud. So I've gone ahead and run the cable directly inside of that shroud point, run it underneath, and then popped it out right here to be able to connect to our RGB LED strip, which runs down on the recessed cavity right here, goes up, and then bends down. And I've also got a secondary LED strip that runs on the inside to give us a little backfill. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and double check and see if the system actually powers on. If it does, and it posts, we're gonna go ahead and pop on the side panels, and we'll go ahead and see then if we can boot into the operating system. So our system's gone ahead and posted without any problems. It's correctly registering the CPU, the memory, all the core components, and looks like everything's A-OK. We're gonna jump into the UEFI quickly though, double check our temperatures. If that all checks out, we're gonna go ahead and put on the side panels and boot up into the operating system. So we've gone ahead and jumped into our desktop without any problems, so that means a successful post and a successful boot. But we're not at the finish line yet. So the last thing we want to do is you can see that we've got a little bit of a look and feel for our system. We've got white, black, and blue. So to be able to go ahead and synchronize everything, we're going to jump into the ASUS Aura software. We're going to drop everything into blue so that the graphics card, the RGB LED strip, and the motherboard are all set to blue. So let's go ahead and do that. So like I was saying, guys, we got one last step, and that's pretty much taking this guy off right here. And now this build's finished.